Hello everyone, my name is Paul. Welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone has had a fantastic last few days. I hope that everyone had a wonderful weekend. I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe. And if not, I hope that you guys find that safety and security in the very near future. There's been a ton of stuff that has happened. We have been off the air since Wednesday night was our last night that we streamed. I am sorry about that, but thank you for everyone that checked in on us. A bunch of the people in the community had actually reached out to us to make sure we're fine. Me and Riley are fine. We had some personal stuff we had to take care of. Had to do some traveling, but I really appreciate everyone checking in. You guys are an awesome community. But it's very happy to see everyone back. We're very happy to be back here and live once again here at the new news. And there has been a lot that has happened over the past weekend. A ton. Geopolitics across the entire world has just gone blitz for some reason. And in Ukraine especially. It's insane. But nonetheless, we're going to be covering the last 5 days of news, including today. Please be sure to check out the video description below. What we're doing here, what the whole object of the project is to help charities and fundraisers and raise money while talking about the news. We're never doing super chats on this channel. We are never pushing merchandising on this channel. None of that will ever be happening. 100% of everything we do goes to charity, goes to fundraisers, goes to raising money to help people in affected areas across the world and try and improve people's lives. How do we do this? Well, it's through you guys as the community. You guys have been awesome so far. If you actually check out in the video description below, you're going to see a ton of different charities and fundraisers. Some of them support the war effort in Ukraine and support troops directly. A lot of them are supporting humanitarian efforts, whether that's in Ukraine or whether that's in different parts of the globe. And we're constantly looking for more. We have several that we're vetting right now that we've actually received from the community. And we have so many in the description now that we physically can't put descriptions with each of these fundraisers. A wonderful problem to have. I want to continue having that problem. I want to fill all 5,000 characters of the description with nothing but fundraiser links. That is really the goal right now. And to also, at some point in the future, actually put a fundraiser on every single stream we do every single night. You guys have been awesome for helping us do that. Please continue to support these organizations. Keep giving them love. If you can't give a lot, give a little. And if you can't give anything at all, that is totally fine too. I understand. But give us a like and subscribe. Let your friends know about us. The reason being is I don't like trying to do the plug on this, but the more people that see this, the more people that see this video and see our channel and participate in our channel, the more good we do overall throughout the entire globe. I really appreciate this love and support you guys have given us as a channel. Even more so, I appreciate the love and support you guys continue to give to these organizations. It's awesome to be able to get this kind of a group together. And we're always looking for more organizations to add to that list. Please check out the Discord in the description below. Jump on there, get in touch with a staff member on our staff team, and give them a link and a short description of a humanitarian organization or just an organization in general for a fundraiser or what have you, and we'll try and go ahead and get that vetted. 80% of all the donations that the organizations we have listed receive go directly to helping people. We're not here to pay salaries or administration's costs. We want to help people to the best of our ability, and the more people here, the bigger the impact. So thank you for the support thus far, and hopefully we will continue to grow this community in a nice and productive way. But in the meantime, with that, we're getting ready to dive right into the news. If you have any comments or questions or anything, please feel free to ask them. I am a subject matter expert when it comes to anti-armor warfare. I was an infantryman in the Marine Corps, specifically an anti-tank missileman. So that's kind of where my area of expertise lies. But I will try to answer any questions you may have to the best of my ability. I have some general knowledge regarding some of the stuff happening. So hopefully we'll get some good ones tonight. But with that, without further ado, we're going to dive right here into the news and with our special report ongoing inside of Ukraine. The first thing we have here is actually in Kyiv, and that's because the M270 Mars 2 system has arrived. The M270 was donated by Germany, who has a set of these suites that they were giving to Ukraine. What the Mars 2 is essentially a large, it's a slightly older version of the HIMARS. The HIMARS is actually a relatively newer system, but the Mars or the M270 is a slightly older variant of it. Uses very similar techniques, similar munitions. It's what it does is it's also a long-ranged artillery system, MLRS system, and it's tracked, so it can go off-road. It's also slightly armored. We can actually take a look at some of this right here for you. And this is coming from Alexei Rezanov, and he is the Minister of Defense. But he said, third brother in a longhand family, the MLRS Mars 2 from Germany has arrived in Ukraine. Thank you to Germany and personally to my colleague, Defense Minister Christine Lambrecht, for these systems. Artillerymen salute our German partners. And that is the M270 Mars 2 right there. This thing is amazing. It's an amazing weapon system. Much like HIMARS, this is going to make a very significant impact on the battlefield. We already see the impact of HIMARS and Mars 2 systems hitting Russian ammunition depots, hitting oil depots, hitting troop columns that are coming into areas like Crimea. And it is making an immense difference for the troops on the front lines. They're not able to readily resupply. They're not readily able to move troops. Anything that they can identify, realistically, anything the Ukrainians can identify as a valuable military objective, they can hit with these systems. And they have enough of them now that they can really do that en masse. So William Young says it's just slightly less mobile prior version of HIMARS, really. Yeah, pretty much. This thing it's just bigger. It's a bigger, bulkier system. It's still very long range. It's still precision guided munitions. It's tracked, so it is better at off-road. As long as the ground is hardened. We know in Ukraine, especially the Rasputitsa mud, that tracked vehicles have a very difficult time moving off-road in the terrain of Ukraine, but this is still going to give them some more flexibility at the reduction of speed, I would say. Not to say this thing isn't fast in the slightest. It definitely has some speed to it. It is lightly armored. It's really only armored for small arms fire and shell fragments, but it is still going to be very effective for them. And the range there, really the range of the missiles means that there's a very small likelihood that Russia would be able to counter battery this. As we move over here to Kharkiv, speaking about HIMARS, HIMARS destroyed propaganda keeps popping up when it comes to the Russians. RIA News reported that 2 HIMARS systems were destroyed in a drone strike because HIMARS would definitely fit in the second floor of a building, and they would, for some reason, shoot at these things. The HIMARS is a truck. It's a truck with a very long-range missile system. It's specifically built. It's a very impressive vehicle, but they're probably not going to put this inside of a building, just because these things are too valuable to be on the move. Russian propaganda has been... So, here we go. This is the HIMARS strike that they have reported on a... they struck these HIMARS reportedly. Just take a look. Yes, very well, very good. You did it. Here's the video. Yeah, so it's Russian propaganda. Why? Well, the HIMARS make such a significant impact on the battlefield. The Russian Federation knows that there are citizens that do not have or that do have VPNs. They are checking out other areas of the internet that Russia has significantly blocked access to. Twitter, Facebook, that the normal social media that basically every Westerner has, and that Russians for the most part had until it was blocked in their country. The thing is, though, that they're not very good at the propaganda. The best propaganda they had was a destroyed utility vehicle that was used in order to tow... No, so Rooster Sideburn says they call the video a HIMARS strike. It's not a HIMARS strike. They say they destroyed 2 HIMARS systems in the second to top floor of a building, which isn't gonna happen. It's a multi-ton vehicle. Like, you're not fitting that thing up the stairs. I'm sorry. It's very good off road, but it's not that good. But yeah, they're saying they destroyed 2 HIMARS in that video in Kharkiv, which we know they didn't. But there's such a big impact on the battlefield, and they know that a lot of citizens are going to see this stuff because of VPNs, especially in the younger generation. So they're specifically talking about destroying HIMARS systems. And they're trying to use it to their advantage propaganda-wise, that the HIMARS have been given to Ukraine. They're saying that the West is supporting genocide by doing this, that the HIMARS are shelling civilian population centers, and they're killing tons of civilians with it, which we know is not true. And they are trying to really rally their population behind, the HIMARS, and therefore the United States are the enemy, and are the true enemy of Russia. That's why we're fighting a war in Ukraine, or a special military operation in Ukraine. And so we're destroying these things so our troops are successful. That is the kind of rhetoric. That's kind of this is kind of where they're going with this. And it's not true. It's just unbelievable propaganda. Like I said, there's a utility truck has a very similar front end design to this. It's built by Oshkosh. Both vehicle chassis are built by Oshkosh. They have very similar designs, but there's a very big difference. The HIMARS has a really big rocket pod system on the back. The transport just has a canvas top on the back, and then it can transport troops and stuff around. And it was towing a artillery gun, an M777 out of Lysychansk. But we've seen all sorts of this rhetoric. It's just important to kind of, they try to post a video for it, and it's unbelievable. It's just unbelievable rhetoric. Over to here in Berestov. Whoops, sorry. There seems to have been a question from JL. It's good. Sorry, not a question, but a comment. It's good they should say that they destroyed all HIMARS. I'm wondering what excuse will they use when their backlines will get wrecked. Well, that's why they aren't saying they destroyed all the HIMARS, because they know it's going to happen. The Russians losing their ammunition depots is inevitable. I don't know if you guys, I don't know how many of you guys know the reference, but all your base belong to us is pretty much what's happening for Ukraine right now. Any ammunition depot, any logistical depot, any field HQ or anything the Russians set up, they basically have to just stay on the move. Otherwise, they're just going to get destroyed by these HIMARS. And they can't say they killed them all, because then what happens when they all get destroyed? Well, it's possible that the Russian propaganda is intentionally bad. Well, for people that are basically cut off from the rest of civilization, realistically speaking, the Russian population, unless you have a VPN and access to the wider internet, then you're pretty much cut off from the rest of the world. Especially if you have especially the older generation, that is less likely to have a VPN and is also more likely to. Is much more likely to believe what the Russian state media is telling them, then yes, it would definitely, it definitely doesn't need to be all that good. It just has to be there. And that's, I think, part of it. I don't understand when it comes to propaganda. I don't think I probably understand enough when it comes to propaganda, why making it intentionally bad would work, though. Aside from it's just good enough, which, looking at anything else Russian industry-wise, is essentially their method of madness. The T-34 wasn't a great tank. It's just they could build them large enough numbers, and it was good enough as a tank. T-72, same thing. T-90, same thing. All their upgrades, the same thing. The AKs, same thing. So I don't know if it's that kind of a mentality or if it's purposeful, but from what I've seen, I don't think it is. I think it's just like everything else, Ukraine is basically a genocide done poorly, and I think their propaganda is done just as poorly too. Anyway, moving on, Berestove was completely destroyed. Berestove is here along the front lines over by Belorivka, and it's been completely wiped off the map. It's currently under Russian control, and it has been completely destroyed by Russian forces. This is as we're starting to move down and further southward here into the Donbass, which is really the meat and potatoes of this war. And what we're starting to see is we're seeing a lot of action in areas such as Bakhmut, Soledar, and Toretsk and other locations here, really in this center, in this axis of advance. It appears that the Russians may have begun an offensive here in this area after weeks of a tactical pause, and we understood that this was likely coming. We don't know at this point if it's just Bakhmut or if we're going for Toretsk and Kostanivka as well. But there seems to be quite immense amount of offensive action, especially artillery fire has significantly picked up, where over 10 settlements just in this area have been hit, and we see large amounts of troop movements. But this city has been wiped completely off of the map. Just take a look. Quite literally wiped off the map. Exterminated. Annihilated, I don't think quite describes this. I think this is complete and utter extermination. This is what we would call scorched earth policy. This is Russian diplomacy at its finest. It's at the barrel of an artillery gun. And this image replays over and over and over again. This is one city. This is one village. And we see village after village after village after village suffering the exact same fate. Most of this no longer is standing. There is nothing left. There is nothing to return to. That is extermination. And that is what we see over and over again along this entire front line. It's disturbing, quite literally, to say the least. The greatest thing humanity is capable of doing is being very effective at killing each other. We're good at really two things: killing each other and building bridges. That's it. We're very, very good at that. And the reason that we're so good at building bridges is because you got to cross rivers every once in a while to kill each other. So, the war should not be fought in the 21st century. This is why. The complete annihilation of cities and villages. With ease. Bombing campaigns took an immense amount of effort during World War II. During World War II, it took hundreds and hundreds of aircraft doing carpet bombing to reach the immense level of destruction over sorties and sorties and sorties of flights from the United Kingdom. It took daytime bombings from the Americans and nighttime follow-on bombings from the British, just to over weeks and months of time to reach the level of destruction that has been committed in just a couple months. It's terrifying. This is why war shouldn't be fought in the 21st century. I hope that the population there has left, and that's come from Erebus Shang. I hope so too, but statistically speaking, someone was still home. Especially older residents. Residents that have lived here even since 2014 or prior to 2014, that have gone through things such as, since the fighting that's been occurring since 2014 between Ukrainians and the separatists. These people are relatively kind of used to warlike conditions, just based off of what they've been through thus far. And Ukraine did try to warn these people that they needed to leave, that what is coming, that what could be coming to them was nothing like they've been through before. But because of that, a lot of older people that just said, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? My life is here. Unfortunately, a lot of people didn't evacuate, but I hope they did too. But the chances are unfortunately against it. And this is another addition as to why I say this is a genocide done poorly. You're under obligation by the Geneva Conventions to minimize civilian casualties. You're under obligation to do everything you can to minimize civilian casualties. You are required by, so many protocols to use weaponry. Under Protocol 1, you're required as a commander to plan your military, what you're doing to minimize collateral damage. Failure to do so is a war crime. And we're seeing it the Geneva Conventions, the international customary humanitarian law, broken over and over and over again, and just cities wiped off the face of the earth. I mean, sure, we have Berestove here, but Berestove is just one. Rubizny, which is much larger, is essentially it's essentially the same thing. Mariupol. I mean, these are scenes that we've seen before. This isn't like a first time. It's just, once again, a horrific event. It's a horrific event. And the imagery is important to see this. It's important for the world to see this. I think that we probably should try and... I mean, I know that there is drone footage of Rubizny, but a lot of it's been edited because a lot of it is from Russian news channels. But, Rubizny, Mariupol, I mean, all of these locations have been catastrophically destroyed. Severodonetsk, Lysychansk. There is no method to the madness outside of scorched earth policy. But I digress. Sukpinka, I'm sorry if I screw that name up. Imagine if you were an RT reporter or journalist and you were told to make up a story about HIMARS being knocked out. So you do it to comply, but you make it unbelievable to anyone who knows a bit. Complicit non-compliance. Huh. Pretty good. I can believe it. Basically trolling the overlords. Oh, man. I can imagine. Yeah, that's probably my favorite way at getting back at people. Is doing something like exactly how they ask, like with no like divergent or tangent. That's pretty much how I piss people off. If I'm doing something or trying to do something and I'm trying to do the best I can on something for somebody or work piece or something, and they're just being a jerk about it, I do it to the point it's annoying. I do it down to the letter of what they want, and usually they end up backing off and just letting me go back to what I do best. But yes, I can see that. I can see that from, I wouldn't say to everybody. I can see that to an extent, certainly. I think that one may have been that. I would also say it's probably out of a lack of understanding or a lack of good news. If you look at the Russian side, there's not really a lot of good news. Riley said, yes, I can confirm that Paul does this. Yes, I do. But yeah, I think you're having a hard time. If you're a reporter for the Russian Federation, I mean, you just got to take a look at their losses. Don't look at like the estimated losses or anything like that. I think that Ukraine is blowing the Russian losses quite out of the water at this point. I don't believe the Kiev independence numbers whatsoever. But it's also an information war, which you need to understand that. It's an information war, and they're each trying to go for their beneficial narrative or to undercut each other's narrative. They're both trying to garner support of the international community. And Ukraine is winning that, but I still think that they're blowing casualty reports out of the water because big numbers are flashy. But I don't think it's true. I think it's... if you look at Ukraine, the Kiev independent numbers, realistically, it means like 70% of their invasion force has been destroyed. And if that was the case, then the war would be over by now. Like, it'd just be over. It wouldn't be happening. There wouldn't be enough troops to fight the war in Ukraine. Just from the Russian side, it would be incomprehensibly over. And the Ukrainians would be, squeezing the Russians out of Ukraine and retaking Crimea right now. And so But yeah, I think some of it's incompetence. I think it's just some of it is non-compliance. I think it is a lot of it's just a lack of good news, because I do know that there is heavy casualties on the Russian side. We can see that very clearly that there's heavy casualties, and so there's not a lot of good news when all your ammo depots are destroyed. There's heavy partisan activity, and everyone hates you. So I can't say for sure. I'm not unfortunately, no, I shouldn't say unfortunately. Fortunately, I'm an independent reporter. I don't work for RT or some kind of a big news agency. We're doing this independently, so we don't have to worry about that. But down here in Popasna, Russian forces are on the move. Once again, there is an offensive, I believe, going on here in Bakhmut. All the indicators are there that an offensive has begun. Limited information is coming out of the area, so we can safely say that there is, some pretty impressive action happening here. We were expecting this, of course. Bakhmut lies along a main axis of advance for the Russian forces. The other locations include Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. Quite significant axes of advance for Russian forces. This was a suspected area of attack. Popasna is really a staging point. Popasna was a major city that was taken. It created a bulge in Ukrainian lines. It allowed for a pocket of Russian troops to flow into this area and help them provide a squeeze on the Luhansk region. It was one of the 9 axes of advance for the Luhansk Oblast when they were taking that. Here we continue to see troops on the move towards the front line. We're seeing significant troop number and movements in here. We also are hearing that reportedly Ukrainian forces have repelled several assaults by Russian troops in the Soledar and Bakhmut areas. And we can take a look here as shelling has begun, but we can take a look at some of these troop movements.
Ну что, осталось от Попасной, бля. Вот. Клуб какой-то, бля. У Колумба уже багажника нет, бля.
So it's just him, and what he's doing is he's filming Popasna as they're passing through this. First of all, this truck, this is not a military truck. Just look at the paint scheme. Like, it's not a military vehicle whatsoever. This is like a dump truck that they have found, and they've loaded all these guys back up into. That tells you Russian logistical issues right off the bat. Right off the bat, this is a Russian logistical nightmare. You see some tradecraft in this. Guys are wearing their goggles. This guy's wearing his goggles. He's not wearing his Kevlar though. And we can see that this truck is just loaded down with guys headed to the front line. Looks like some mix of Russian troops and separatists. But Popasna has just been completely destroyed. I mean, there's just nothing left of it. So, Russian troop movements here in Popasna, and that brings us up over here into Bakhmut, where Bakhmut is under a very intense shelling campaign. Bakhmut and the surrounding settlements have been shelled pretty heavily by Russian forces over the last 5 days. There have been offensives, minor offensives in some areas, such as Soledar, Bakhmut, and Toretsk. However, those have been repelled thus far. The Ukrainian troops within this region are very well entrenched. This has been an expected offensive. This is something that Ukrainian troops were expecting and that the international community has been expecting. But however, there are still, once again, more troops en route to the front lines. We can see here, this is from Bakhmut. This is from the 31st of July. Rooster Sideburns, being in a garbage truck would be appropriate. Yes. Yes. Yes, it would. However, there is some pretty graphic news that has come out too. Maltreatment is an understatement when it comes to this. A very disturbing video came out immediately, essentially after the stream that we had on Wednesday last week. And this was of a Ukrainian soldier who, a Russian Wagner mercenary, he tortured and castrated a Ukrainian POW. For those that don't know what castration is, he cut off the genitalia of the Ukrainian POW while he was alive. And it's very barbaric. And his identity has been released. Multiple Ukrainian units are going to be looking for him. We know that this man was also at the Azovstal. We also know that he is served at other parts of the front lines. We will not be sharing the video out of respect to this Ukrainian soldier's family. This Ukrainian soldier this POW was killed. He was executed summarily after this. Yeah. There's no way to really report well on this. It's so barbaric it's you talk about torture and you talk about execution and you talk about the things that the Russians do. And you talk about the massacre, the sheer bombardments of Mariupol and Lysychansk. And, we talk about the massive artillery usage. That's just devastating. But that's an artilleryman, and he's sitting kilometers away from what he's shooting at. He's sitting kilometers away. He knows he's shooting at a Ukrainian city, but he doesn't know exactly where his rounds are landing. The FTC does. JL says we will get to know only about the tip of the iceberg anyways. That's what makes it even worse. Yeah, it is. We got more on this kind of stuff, though. But this is... The difference between this and the atrocities done by artillery is the fact that artillery is sitting kilometers away. To do this, and we know that this probably isn't the first one. To say that this man hasn't done it before probably is likely incorrect. He just got caught. But this is up close and personal. That's the difference. This is... You have to be evil. You have to be sick and twisted. Up close and personal. That's a huge difference. That takes a special kind of person that I don't know if I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. I've never met anyone that was this psychotic. William Young says those who identities were leaked will have justice or vengeance. Don't worry. Yeah. Now normally we don't show we don't identify anybody on this channel, but this is just so utterly horrific that I can't. Let's go ahead and get into it. This has been blurred out. They hogtied him. This took more than one person. They hogtied him. and then they castrated him. So he's looking at a positive ID on him. And they did find it. So this is that RIA video. This is he's with the Wagner group. This is the RIA video from the Azot plant. And they were able to get his shoes. What? That is a blurred image of him castrating them. And that is the individual right there. And also, that's from the Georgian Legion, who is the Foreign Legion for Georgia there. And they said, we will not rest until this scum is deleted. He's been added as a #1 target on our list of those present in Ukraine. Yeah, the Wagner group is an unbelievably horrific group. They were caught staging a mass grave in Mali, saying that the French committed atrocities against the Mali people when the French were leaving Mali. So as soon as they left a base, the Wagner group went in there. They basically went and they killed a bunch of locals, and then they tried staging them in the mass grave. Unbeknownst to them, there was a French drone flying over them. The Wagner group also attacked my sister platoon when we were on our first deployment. They attacked them in the Omar oil fields back in 2018, back in February, which we responded to as QRF. And then we bombed them for like 3.5 hours and killed over 300 of their friends. And then the Russians said that we had nothing to do with it. That's what the Wagner group is. The Wagner group is just an extension of the Russian Federation military. They're technically a private military corporation, or a PMC group. But in reality, all they are is they're plausible deniability for the Russian Federation. They've used them to fill manpower gaps in their actual military, and use them for clandestine operations that Russia would rather not have official insight on. It's very likely that during the incursion into Crimea, when there were Russian troops with no marked insignias on them, but they're wearing Russian military gear, that was likely the Wagner group under orders from the Russian Federation to annex Crimea. They have a very large PMC corps. They are essentially just another division in the Russian military. They're used throughout the world. They're operating in Mali. They're operating in Syria. They're operating everywhere that you can think of. If there's a third world country or a conflict going on, they're there. And Ukraine is no different. This guy is apparently at least a marksman with them. He's obviously seen carrying a Dragunov. But yeah, it's horrific. And it doesn't get better tonight. It really doesn't. We'll get to that here in a few. But that's just indescribable. Here we have some deja vu. This is actually titled, I didn't come up with this title. This is actually titled by Ilya Ponomarenko, who is he's a reporter with the Kyiv Independent. And he posted a photo of a Ukrainian soldier. He's resting in a trench. And it was shot very beautifully in black and white. And it's called deja vu for a reason. So this is the photo of the Ukrainian soldier here resting in the trench here somewhere in the Donbass. We've seen a photo like this, all the time, but this one was shot in black and white, and it's for a very good purpose. And the reason why it's deja vu, this is from World War I. This is this is taken, I believe, in 1918, somewhere on the Western Front. These appears to be British doughboys based off of the Leon fields here. And they're resting in their trench line. These two photos are essentially exactly the same, taken just a little over 100 years apart. Exactly the same, essentially taken 104 years apart. Deja vu. I've compared many times what's happening in Ukraine to World War One and World War Two. The rhetoric's very World War II-ish, especially Hitler-ish when it comes to Putin and the Russians. It's very Third Reich rhetoric, to the point that you can swap out keywords, or at least countries, inside of some of Hitler's speeches for justifications for military actions against things like Czechoslovakia and Austria and Hungary and stuff like that. And it's almost exactly the phrasing of Putin and the Russians. And the art imagery, the shelling of areas along this front, the fields that are taken with drone footage, the fields just littered with craters, the massive trench systems. That's World War One. It's World War One in the 21st century. Warfare has become so deadly that to poke your head up above the ground is death. Artillery is in fashion again. Massive uses of artillery is in fashion again, apparently. And the photos are no different. The mentality, the situation is no different between 1918 and 2022 for these soldiers and these two photographs. It's all the same. William Young says, what could humanity do if we hadn't focused most of our efforts on destruction and war? Well, probably not a lot, believe it or not. War is a terrible thing that should never happen. I am a very firm believer in that. I think that massive wars are a really bad thing. What's happening in Ukraine is a really terrible thing. But there's also a very big flip side to that. And that is that without war, technology really stagnates. A lot of the things that we take for granted now is developed because it has a usage in war. Your ability to travel on an aircraft manufacturing improved immensely because of war. Because of the need for aircraft in air superiority. And you see some of the first main huge airline companies in the late 40s and early 50s. They start off their airlines using renovated DC-3 Douglas transport aircraft produced during World War II to transport troops and equipment. Your GPS, what you use to navigate around when you're out on a drive and going on a road trip, developed by the U.S. military to pinpoint military targets, and to also guide military units using Blue Force trackers or BFTs. GPS system made for the U.S. military was very effective in 1991 during the Gulf War. You have the Battle of 73 Easting. You have a lot of tremendous outmaneuvering thanks to the uses of GPS. That has furthered the technology. Your computer, your cell phone, mobile phones created, through the need for, causes the need for your phone and everything. Need causes ingenuity. Even medicine has advanced through war, prosthetics, etc. Exactly. It's a double-edged sword. We as human beings, when the need is there for us to develop a better technology, it's there. We do it. We overcome it when we improve ourselves at a much more rapid rate when a war is ongoing than if there isn't, than during peacetime. However, a lot of people have to die for that to happen, and that's the terrible part of it. A lot of people don't agree with the occupations of Iraq and Afghanistan. That's 100% justifiable. There's a lot of stuff that I don't agree with it, and I was there. So I don't. There's a lot of things that there's a lot of sides to that and a lot of rhetoric you can spew around. But one thing that you can't deny is the technological capability of the U.S. military now versus in 2003 is completely different. The precision of U.S. strikes in 2020 was completely different from the precision strikes being done in 2003 when we invaded Iraq. Those were two different entire things. 2003 Iraq, we could probably drop a bomb on a target. We could probably drop a bomb and blow up a house, and that's probably as accurate as we can get. Now we can put a missile into someone's bedroom, kill them, and the person in the kitchen is going to be probably wondering what that loud noise was coming from the bedroom and go check on her man and see if he's cheating. That's probably what's happening. Like, that's how accurate we are now. And we had to make a lot of mistakes and a lot of bad things happened, but Russia didn't get that. They didn't get that experience. They didn't have the need to engineer something so precise. And nor do I think they had the budget to. But that's a conversation for another time. Hopefully actually later here in the stream. But as we jump down here, the situation doesn't get any better when it comes to the terrifying things that are happening. Russia, I titled this "Russia is a Terrorist State." The U.S. has not declared Russia a terrorist state. I believe that we should. Being an American, I believe that we should. But it's not just the castration. The castration alone, if you were to chalk it up by itself, you were to disregard the rest of the entire war, this is one individual who committed a war crime who should be punished accordingly. And then this happened. This is the Olenivka POW massacre. Most of these were Azovstal survivors. These were POWs. Russia says that on the 29th, in the middle of the night, Ukraine struck this facility with HIMARS. And calls at this point have been intercepted by the SBU, reportedly hearing that it was Russians who were admitting to it being planned. I don't ever post those phone calls. They have a lot of juicy ones. It's fantastic, but I don't ever post them. But it's pretty terrible. Russia reports that 193 people, 50 have been killed and 73 wounded. They refuse to release any information about the killed, injured, and survivors. Russia also denied the International Committee of the Red Cross to visit. Not a single guard or Russian soldier was on site during the blast. And RT also filmed the remains of those and paraded it on national TV. Satellite footage shows the blast wave going outward from the middle of the building. No other areas of the detainment facility were targeted. It also shows the creation of a mass grave site. The footage was that was seen on the 27th, and then covered up on the 30th, a day after the blast. So here's the satellite imagery. We have several things of satellite imagery here. Here's that mass grave site. So this is the 27th where they're starting to dig it. And there you see it's filled in. Dug. Filled. Dug. And filled. And once again we can see all of the facility here. You can see where this is the location of the blast. You can see where the blast is there. Once again, you can see that it's an outward blast. You get up close. You can see this is going up and out. If you go, we did put an 18 plus section here on this video. If you go onto our website, you can actually go onto the maps. Every day I post them before the stream, and you can take a look at some of this. It's too terribly graphic for me to post this on here. it's pretty terrible. It's nightmare-inducing terrible. Aravis Ching says, I heard that they moved folks there before the blast. So that's reportedly true. We don't know too much about what the Russian side has done. Yes, this is a warehouse outside the colony. It was used for the Azovstal. Their protection was guaranteed during that whole endeavor. That their POWs were guaranteed protections. Since then, the Russians have also said that they should execute all of the Azovstal Nazis, as they called them. It's just it's terrible. Rooster Cyburn says, every time I watch this stream, I get angry with the world. And Riley responded, you should see the things we don't and can't report. Yeah. Here's the thing. We don't put 18 plus sections onto this stuff very often. I think it's important to see. YouTube does not agree with that, but I think it's important to see, and that's fine. You know, everyone has the rules for their platform, and it's there for a reason. I don't think children should see all this stuff. But I see stuff here that, you know, when we're researching and we're going through, you see about maybe 10 to 25% of what we see, you know, in a night when we're researching. And most of it is very gory. I see, you know, I've worked on hundreds of casualties as a CLS Marine. Real live casualties, you know, of civilian population and everything when I was in Syria. I've, you know, seen all sorts of wounds and all sorts of just messed up stuff, right? Like, it's just, and I see things that make me want to get sick, and that's hard. Some of those photos make me want to get sick. That's in the 18 plus section. I've seen stuff here researching that I've never seen in person, and that's hard. It's just unbelievable. What has happened in Olenivka is just unbelievable. And the destruction pattern of this shows of a shockwave blasting outward. It looks like that what they basically did is they basically took the doors, they shut them, locked them, had this place pre-prepped with explosives, detonated it, and then burned everyone alive inside. Yeah, Aravis Chang, echo what JL said earlier, tip of the iceberg. Exactly. And I think this is just, you know, even when researching, we don't see everything. That's the most terrible part. It's just indescribable. Ukraine has tried to get the UN involved. Has tried to get the ICRC, the Red Cross, involved. Quote, we communicate with the Red Cross. Re-UN. I sent letters, official requests at first day, no response, even unofficial. And that's coming from the Ukrainian Commissioner for Human Rights. Like I said, the safety and security of the Azovstal defenders was guaranteed by the UN and Red Cross under the deal that was for the surrender of the Azovstal to stop the bloodshed there in Mariupol. Per the UN spokesperson, Djark, the UN said, considering whether the conditions are in place that would make it possible for an investigation. So they don't even think that it's possible for the UN to conduct an investigation. I have a hard time. My whole job here is to speak and talk on an issue, and to talk about what we're seeing here. The stuff that I have seen from Alanivka has no words to describe the horrificness of it. It has no words. It looks like the scene from, the best way I can describe of what it seems like has happened is the scene from The Patriot. If you've ever seen the Mel Gibson movie The Patriot, where they bring in all the civilians in the village and they bring them into the church and then they lock the church doors and burn them alive. That's essentially what has happened here. Except for real. Like, that's a real thing that seems to have happened. The burn patterns coming out the windows, the burn patterns from inside. It doesn't look like an explosion just killed everyone all hunky-dory quickly, right? Like, at least they went quick. No, these people burned alive. They burned alive a slow and painful death. So jump down here into Mariupol, we have a few different updates. Russians are stealing the tiles out of the drama theater and shipping them out back to Russia. There are no repairs happening on the building, and they're just basically looting it before they're going to be abandoning it. I don't understand. I don't understand at all. It's not the only thing. They're also stealing traffic lights. Don't know why. As we know from earlier streams, we know that the Kadarovites shot them all while they were fighting in Mariupol. Ervis Shang on Olnivka says it reminds me of gas chambers and concentration camps. Yeah. Once again, Russia is a terrorist state, and Ukraine is a genocide done poorly. That's my personal opinion. You can agree or disagree. That's up to you. But what is happening and what has happened over the last 5 days only reiterates my personal opinion. At least I believe it does. This is just a genocide done poorly. We didn't have to look past Mariupol to know that, but they keep proving the point over and over again. And we'll get to why it's ironic later. So this is how locals cook. So this is what cooking your dinner is like here in Mariupol.
Теперь у всех на улице. Пока, слава богу, погода позволяет, используют вон ящики из-под боезапасов, патронов, да, то есть своя такая полевая кухня. И тут практически у каждого подъезда полевые кухни, вода и все остальное. Кухни теперь.
So that's how you cook if you're a resident of Mariupol. JL says, using the most precise rockets to strike a prison with Ukrainian soldiers, also considering amount of available HIMARS is highly insufficient, and the cost of the rockets very logical, right? Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, there's also putting them this close to the front, like putting POWs this close to the front, by the way, is also not like kosher with the Geneva Conventions either. You have to take prisoners of war much further away from the front lines. That's the thing. Believe it or not, there's actually the they talk a lot about prisoners of war and detainees and prisoners amongst the civilian population, how you need to conduct trials, how to do the death sentence. Like, all of that stuff is covered in the Geneva Conventions to an insane extent. An insane extent. It's covered in every protocol, and it doesn't matter. It's covered. Every single one covers it. It's insane. There's so many rules and regulations. There's probably more rules for the Geneva Conventions regarding, you know, the treatment of prisoners in a war zone than there is in any domestic, like, prison system, no matter where you live. It is insane to try and read through. Like, just before you even get to civilians, you have to get through prisoners. And it takes forever. It takes entire sections, entire chapters, pages and pages and pages worth of articles regarding the treatment of prisoners. It's insane. And it's unbelievable that, yeah, USA had to bring German POWs to the United States during World War II. Yeah, I know. Like, troop transports would take troops to Europe and bring prisoners of war home. Like, to the United States. And it's insane. And most of them loved it. Most of the German POWs loved being in the United States. They loved it. They ate well. They were treated relatively nicely for being prisoners of war. Like, I have never heard of a Russian POW, of a German POW going, yeah, I was treated just terribly. I'm sure it happened. Like, I'm sure it did happen. Like, I'm not going to deny that, you know, I'm not going to say the United States was a saint. I mean, we don't have to look very far to know that's not very true now, is it? Like, no. But in general speaking, like, a German POW is treated really, really well for World War II. Including when they are captured following the Holocaust. And then even then, while they were waiting the Nuremberg trials, they were still treated pretty well. And they served most of their lives in prison. Unless they were immediately executed. Which they were treated well up until they were executed. Clear up until getting their final meal. Like, it's just unbelievable. But the treatment of prisoners for the Russians is insane to me. The fact that people could do this is insane to me. It boggles. I thought every day I think I've seen the worst of humanity, and then humanity proves me wrong. It really does. Anyway, as we continue in Mariupol, Mariupol's left coast near Azovstal has been fully destroyed. Yeah, let's go to the beach, guys.
Вот такой вот здесь видно город открывается с высоты птичьего полета. Хлопает до сих пор на Азовстале. Хлоп, хлоп.
Церковь видна на центральном этом.
Life on the streets? You quite literally have to live on the streets if you're in Mariupol. Because you don't have a house. Your house is gone. There is no house. There's no house. There's no water. There's no food. There's no electricity. There's no gas. There's nothing. You literally have nothing. Unbelievable. Another ammunition depot was destroyed in the Zaporizhzhia Oblast, as we get to some more uplifting news. So Ukrainian forces destroyed another depot located in occupied parts of the Zaporizhzhia Oblast. This once again further degrades Russian capability to commit war. This one, based off of the smoke, I'm going to say is some kind of a fuel depot or fuel vehicles or oil. Typically speaking, black smoke, there's definitely different different ways that different smoke types can happen. But when you're talking about thick black smoke, it's a very good indicator that it's either a large tire fire, which is commonly used as a signal. Tire fires, for instance, were used during the Battle of Mogadishu. The militias there in Somalia lit because they knew that the United States could listen in on the radio traffic. They would use tires, and they would burn these tires as a signal to the militias that the Americans were coming. And then this is and anytime you see a vehicle being destroyed, all of the diesel fuel, all of the oil inside the vehicle is burning, and it gives off this very thick black smoke rising up. So this is a pretty good indicator that this may have been a fuel depot that was destroyed, or an oil depot, just because of the smoke coloration. And you'll see the difference between that and an ammunition depot once we get here a little bit later. But this is here in Nikopol. And Russian forces appear to have used thermite once again here in Nikopol. This is a heavily populated area. This actually breaks the third protocol of the Geneva Conventions, of the 1948 Geneva Convention specifically, or the fourth Geneva Conventions. This is Protocol 3, adopted in 1980, that this would break. And that's the use of incendiary munitions in highly concentrated civilian populations. And it's very obvious that this is thermite. Just take a look. What is it? What is happening is probably the better description. Thermite is an incendiary munition. It's used pretty extensively by every warring power that I know of, every modern military power that I know of. Even the United States knows, even the United States has thermite. I was taught how to use a thermite grenade. It has a much shorter fuse than an actual fragmentation grenade, by the way. Much shorter fuse. But thermite grenades in the United States and thermite's used for demolitions. If you need to destroy radios or your vehicle's engine block or something, you put a thermite grenade on the engine block, or you put the thermite grenade on a stack of radios. You pull the pin, and it burns at thousands of degrees Fahrenheit. And it burns and melts its way right through. You can, I think, destroy like 5 or 6 radios stacked on top of each other with it. It's pretty impressive. 4 or 5 radios. PRC 117s specifically. But thermite is used in other ways too. This is the Russians are most commonly using thermite as an airburst, and what they do is they time it. So you have to time the fuse on an artillery projectile. Some of them are impact based, but a lot of times these are timed. You actually have, if you're the ammo man for an artillery or a mortar battery, what you're doing is you have a wrench and you actually adjust the timing on the munition based off of how far it's going to travel and wherever you want it to detonate. That's how you get like flares being used. That's how you get air bursts like this. And thermite, when you're air burst it like this, it spews out everywhere, and then it comes down and it rains down, and it causes this to spread over a larger area to improve your chances of igniting a large fire, which is what we see happening. If you actually move over here to the edge of the video, you can actually see where some thermite, where this thermite has actually come down. And you can see where a fire has started over here. These ones over here, you can see it coming down. It's burning right here. It's burning over here. It burns this very bright white color. And it's an incendiary munition. It's terrible. The use of it against civilian populations is against the Geneva Convention. The use of it against personnel is against the customary international humanitarian law. You can't use it against personnel targets either. You can't use it against the infantry. That's a war crime. There are guys, there are U.S. servicemen sitting with lifetime sentences in Fort Leavenworth right now for doing what's called a shake and bake, where they burned people alive with white phosphorus. Like, that's a thing. They're serving life prison terms for it, for doing it in Afghanistan and Iraq. Like, that's a thing that has happened. And they're doing it over and over again here. I mean, this is just one example, but we've done so many times where they're using, they're using white phosphorus, or they're using thermite, as we've later identified this as, against civilian targets and against highly concentrated. They aired it on RIA News. On international news, they aired them using thermite on the Azovstal. You think Nikopol is big? Mariupol. Highly concentrated civilian population. This whole area is a highly concentrated civilian population. Nikopol. Look at that. Look at all those houses. High concentration civilian population. That's all. You got two things in that one video. That's a war crime. That's a war crime of multiple counts. That's breaking that's, the obvious one's Protocol 3. It also breaks Protocol 1. It also breaks the actual just Geneva Conventions. That breaks so many things. JL, that is called a highly important military targets. To the Russian Federation, everything is a military target. I've learned one thing when it comes to the Russian military. The U.S. asks if there will be any civilian casualties. The Russians ask if there is a possibility that there's a military target there. They're just backwards. The Russians militarily have always kind of been backwards, but this is just blatant war crimes. Just blatant war crimes. Over and over again. But the Ukrainians are hitting back. Another ammunition depot was destroyed here in Belivka, which is here in the Kherson Oblast here to the south. This is very likely a HIMARS strike just because of how deep it is into enemy territory. They have destroyed another ammunition depot, and we can actually take a look at some of this here. Now, there's a couple ways that we can tell this is an ammo depot. Now, I don't know if you can tell just by the coloration there, but this is, it's a little bit darker out, but this isn't pure black smoke. This is a good mixture of smoke, which tells me there's probably some vehicles in there. But you can see, like over here where it's a lot more gray and brown. It's not a super thick black smoke. It's kind of a mixture between an oil fire and a standard fire, like a wood burning fire would be. So that's the first indicator. This is ammunition. There's different colorations in the smoke, such as black, it's brown and gray and that kind of stuff. You also have a very thick white smoke going off here, which tells me that this is likely. So there's been some sympathetic detonation of smoke rounds, producing a thick white smoke, probably white phosphorus too, which produces a very thick white smoke, and same thing with some thermite. And the other thing is cook-offs, or sympathetic detonations. Cook-offs, you hear other ammunition going off, that's followed this main explosion. This ammunition is heating up in the fires, that's burning, and it's being set off by other ammunition going off around it. Basically, it's getting so hot that the propellant inside and the primer are igniting, and that's setting off the munitions. they are extremely dangerous like this in a civilian area. Because unlike, it's not guided in any sort of fashion. It's just rockets and bullets and everything else, rounds just laying everywhere in the middle of a fire, and there's no barrel or tube or anything else guiding these things in any direction, even in a general sense. So it's just going everywhere. It's going to go where it wants to go. And it's extremely dangerous for other people. They don't have nearly the velocity they would. I'll at least give it that. They don't have nearly the velocity they would if it was actually being chambered and fired. But it is still immensely dangerous. But that's a very good indicator that this is an ammunition depot as well. Is that cook-off? If you get that cook-off if it's ammunition. You don't get that if it's not. If we jump back up here to the Antonovsky Bridge, where we've gotten more footage of the ferry taking guys across the bridge. There's a ferry now that goes across the Dnipro River. The Antonovsky Bridge is totaled. There's no using the Antonovsky Bridge anymore. It's gone. It's just totaled. It's not collapsed, but it might as well be. It's crippled so badly infrastructure-wise that the Russians can't use it. It has demoralized the Russian forces that know in the Kherson, in northern Kherson, that they're literally quite just changing in civilian clothes, and we'll get to that in a moment, to flee. But we see this on the Ukrainian side as well. Usually when it gets this desperate, it's not good. The battle usually doesn't last very long. The Ukrainians, during the Battle of Severodonetsk, they set up ferries across the Seversky Donetsk River. If I can get over to the Kherson Oblast, or not Kherson, but so you have the Seversky Donetsk River right here. During the Battle of Severodonetsk, they were using boats to ferry, as ferries to bring across this river, because Russia had taken out all three major bridges. And it wasn't very long after that Ukrainian troops had to completely retreat, get on these ferries, retreat across the river, and go to Lysychansk, and then we had the dominoes kind of fall from there. The resistance usually doesn't last very long once you lose your ability to resupply. And the Russians have lost that ability to resupply, and now we're seeing the reversal, where the Russians are now using a ferry to cross. They're using a much larger one, but a ferry nonetheless. Take a look. So as you can see, they're using it for civilians too. I don't think that's probably a good choice on their part, seeing as military supplies or civilians. I'm pretty sure this is probably just a propaganda thing for them. But that is their kind of makeshift ferry that they're currently using. They have some patrol boats on either side of this thing to get it to work, as we can see here. They've just basically put a bunch of stuff together here, some barges, some pontoon barges to cross. There's no hope for them. They have to use a ferry. The Dnipro River is too fast and too deep for them to. Basically, the current is too fast for them to pontoon bridge across it. They have to use a ferry now. Their only other crossing point is actually over here, which is on the. Which is here at Novakovka. This is the bridge here across the dam. They do have a crossing point here, but that has also been damaged. JL says time for some fireworks at the Crimea Bridge now. Yeah, I think that would probably be better done later in the campaign, retaking Crimea, than now. There's also a crap ton of missile defenses that are down here, and a bunch of air defenses, because it is the bridge. And so if you were to hit the Crimean Bridge, now all of those air defense platforms can be sent to the front lines. So it's actually better to just keep those air defenses here and make them have to guard this point, which is kind of impractical to hit anyway. than try and than actually free up those forces and send them somewhere else. It actually it doesn't make any sense to hit the Crimean Bridge right now. If they're trying to push, just if they get down here and they're pushing to Sevastopol, oh yeah, hit the bridge. But right now, when they're stuck up here in Kherson, not the greatest. I don't think that's the greatest military objective to do there. As we jump up here into the Kherson Oblast, the Russian army is reportedly hit pretty hard at this point. So they're retreating at this point here, especially out of the northern part of the Kherson Oblast and the Mykolaiv Oblast, which would be up here. They're reportedly retreating out of this area, and after a full columns of echelon equipment were destroyed en route from Crimea. Apparently, about 80 Russian troops have been killed, about 200 injured. 46 settlements have reportedly already been liberated here in the Kherson Oblast, as well as some in the Mykolaiv Oblast, according to the acting Oblast head for the Kherson region. So most of the cities were reportedly destroyed by 90%, and Ukrainian forces are under a pretty intense shelling, but the counteroffensive is happening in this region. It's relatively successful at this point, seeing as the Russians can't resupply themselves. But the Russians are hitting back for whatever reason. On July 31st, the owner of the Nibulyan Agricultural Company, which is the largest agricultural company in Ukraine, Alexei Vadatursky, as well as his wife, were killed in a Russian strike at his home. Propagandist and the founder of RT, Margarita Samoyan, called this denazification in progress. But he was killed along with his wife while they were asleep. Mykolaiv has been shelled pretty heavily, though. So Russian strikes actually hit a hospital, and they struck Mykolaiv multiple times over the weekend. Very serious. We know of at least one person that has been killed. There's been several different statements regarding dead and wounded out of Mykolaiv. I just went with one dead at this point to try and minimize that. We know at least one person has been killed in this strike. That was confirmed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But they hit a hospital, that specifically they hit the emergency room of a hospital. They took a direct hit. They also hit a school and several residential complexes, but we can see that here. So that is part of the hospital ward that wasn't completely burned, which we'll get here in a second. And we can see some of these munitions are just dug themselves into the ground. This is from the hospital. This is the emergency room section. It took a direct hit and was completely burned out by Russian forces. Mykolaiv's been hit pretty hard several times over the last few months, and that doesn't seem to be lightening up. It's to the point that Russian Federation has actually started converting S-300 and S-400 anti-air batteries in order to do ground attacks and using them as basically impromptu theater ballistic missiles. And as we move over here into Odessa, the first grain ship has left the port of Odessa. This is the first shipment of grain since that four-way agreement, between the United Nations, Turkey, Ukraine, and Russia was signed over a week ago. And hopefully we'll see more shipments leaving the port of Odessa here soon. This is going to cut back on collateral hunger in the world as a result of the war in Ukraine. That doesn't mean that there won't be persistent issues. According to the United Nations, they estimate that roughly half of their humanitarian aid for the World Food Program comes from Ukrainian grain. So there will still be very significant repercussions, but luckily at least some of those will be alleviated with this agreement, and it seems to actually be coming to fruition. We can take a look at that here. awesome to see that the first shipment of grain, it's reportedly already made it to Turkey, so it's undergoing inspection in Turkey. But that actually wraps up all of the news inside of Ukraine, all the big news that has happened inside of Ukraine over the last 5 days, from Thursday until now. But now we get to move on to the rest of the world, and there have been some very big developments geopolitically throughout the rest of the world. And of course, we're going to start up here in Russia, where the first one actually comes out of the Bryansk Oblast. So this is the city of Klimovo, specifically outside of the city of Klimovo, here at this little military base that they have. And you can see it's an active Russian military base. They have Russian vehicles and everything sat out there. You got some MTLBs over here. And guess what? The Ukrainians hit it. So the Ukrainians conducted an artillery strike here at the military facility outside of Klimovo, and they did what seems to be pretty extensive damage. Bryansk is home to quite a large amount of Russian military forces and Russian bases, so it's very likely that more strikes will occur here in the near future. It was an air base. It doesn't seem to have an active runway anymore, but it's still used as a military installation here in Russia, and we can see some of these strikes here. So, once again, quite extensive. Oh, I actually missed a photo. So, as you can see here, that is the smoke coming up from that military facility outside of Klimovo. As we jump up here to Moscow, of course, we get some wonderful rhetoric. So, as everyone's favorite friend does every time you get a random weird message on Facebook Messenger, sorry, I was hacked. Dmitry Medvedev, who is the spokesman for the Kremlin, published a post on his Telegram in which he calls Kazakhstan and Georgia artificial states, quote unquote. Quote, all of the peoples inhabiting the once great and mighty USSR will once again live together in friendship, end quote. He also claimed that Kazakhstan is currently executing a genocide against Russians. He later wrote that his account had been hacked. After the liberation of Kiev and all of the territories of Little Russia, a term often used by propagandists to subordinate Ukraine to the larger Russian nation, from the groups of the nationalists who preach their invented Ukrainianness, Russia will become united again. After that, under only the hand of Moscow, led by the Slavic people, we will go on the next campaign to restore the borders of our motherland, which, as is known, do not end anywhere. Such a country as Georgia did not exist, but appeared within the borders of the Russian Empire. So, yeah, he's gone nuts. There you go. There's his post. I highly doubt his account was hacked. Just going to start there. I don't think his account was hacked. Because this falls directly in line with all of the rest of the rhetoric we've ever heard from the Russians. So I don't believe it was hacked. And Medvedev says some pretty crazy stuff. So I'm also not... I think maybe Putin or someone probably pulled Medvedev inside and said, listen, you got to fix this now. And that probably is how that went. But... yeah. So anyway, that's Medvedev. That's the spokesman of the Kremlin. That's Putin's spokesman right there, in his wonderful rhetoric. Canada imposed new sanctions on the Russian Federation, and the Russian embassy in Canada gave a nice response to it. in their official statement here. This is coming from the Embassy of the Russian Federation in Canada, over there in Ottawa, Ontario. A new round of illegal and unjustifiable sanctions once again demonstrate Ottawa's biased and thoughtless position on the Ukrainian crisis. Canada's government, without any evidence, is trying to blame the Russian side for provocations and false flag operations clearly staged by the Kyiv regime, such as Bucha. Moreover, Canadian authorities and media outlets deliberately put blind eye on the egregious crimes committed by the Ukrainian military, which keeps on shelling civilian areas of Donbass with Western heavy weapons and killing children at playgrounds with anti-personnel mines. PFM-1 Lepidstock, prohibited by the Ottawa Convention. Well, where to start? First of all, Bucha. The amount of evidence that the Russians committed the atrocities in Bucha is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's just insanely unbelievable how much evidence there is. Secondly, just look at what we've done here on the channel in the last about hour or so. Also unbelievable. It's just insane. War crimes galore. Russia is a terrorist state. Clearly a terrorist state. Egregious crimes committed by Ukrainian military, which keeps on shelling civilian areas of Donbass with Western heavy weapons and killing children on playgrounds with anti-personnel mines. Well, we're going to start with the shelling with Western weapons. The HIMARS system is probably one of the most accurate weapon systems ever created by man, and is capable of putting a giant missile on target within 1 meter of where it is intended to land. So if they wanted to kill a lot of separatist children, or whatever you want to call them, they're Ukrainians. They're just Ukrainians that live in an occupied zone. If they wanted to kill more of their own people, they would be able to do so at a terrifying rate. Instead, what do we see? Well, we see that according to the firm's fire maps, which NASA has up and running, their satellite is picking up a lot less action on the front lines because of the destroyed ammunition depots, which we also have a ton of evidence as to show that they are indeed being hit. What we don't get a lot of, seeing as Western weaponry, once again, thanks to the fact that we occupied Iraq and Afghanistan for so long and had to develop some of the most precision-guided munitions in the world, in order to limit civilian casualties fighting a counterinsurgency for 20 years, well, they're not killing a ton of people with it. Are there civilian casualties? Yes. Is that a tragedy? Yes. Is it terrible? Yes. But you know what would help? Stop putting ammunition depots in civilian populations, which is, once again, crazy enough, against the Geneva Conventions. Furthermore, once again, it's extremely accurate weaponry. You have the Excalibur round for the M777, which we know the Ukrainians have. They have, it's literally a GPS-guided munition. It's a rocket-assisted or high-explosive artillery round. It's a precision-guided munition for the M777 artillery. And you also have the HIMARS and the Mars 2. No. Okay, second part. They're killing children at playgrounds with the anti-personnel mines. The PFM TAC-1, Lepidstock, prohibited by the Ottawa Convention. You know what's ironic about this? Russia nor Ukraine are signatories of the Ottawa Convention. In fact, neither is the United States. In case you didn't know. None of those countries, no 3 countries are signatories of the Ottawa Convention. The United States does abide by the Ottawa Convention despite not being a signatory, but it still allows them the ability to use these types of munitions. It still allows us to maintain and use cluster munitions and landmines. But we do abide by it. You cannot use self-triggered weaponry with the United States military. Even your claymores, you have to manually trigger it with some kind of a triggering device, whether that's a pull tab or whether that's their clackers, as everyone likes to think of. But you have to trigger it manually. You have to see. The only self-triggered devices that the United States actually does in its inventory, or that we use at all, that I have personally used, were there were flares, pop flares, which you can use via tripwire because they're non-lethal. So, yeah, it's a thing. And also, the only people we've seen use cluster munitions with any evidence to back up those claims would be the Russians. We know that the Russians use cluster munitions against multiple areas. We know that they used it against the Azov 1. We know that they've used them against Slavyansk and Bakhmut. We know they've used cluster munitions up in the north, Kharkiv, Kyiv. We know they've used cluster munitions pretty much everywhere. So we don't have any evidence of Ukrainian usage of cluster munitions, besides some little pellets that were left on the ground. Once again, at the Azov 1, where we know that the Russians did, in fact, use cluster munitions against Ukrainian forces. And once again, you're not signatories. Nobody there is signatories of the Ottawa Convention. So what you're saying is that nobody broke any rules is just horrific. Of course, I always got to put in a meme when I see something that fits perfect. Ironic, of course, with Palpatine. But Russia attempts to sway the UN using the Geneva Conventions. After everything we've seen when it comes to the... I have gone through and polled you, for you, on this channel, multiple times, the Geneva Conventions. I pulled the actual Geneva Conventions up on this channel, and their protocols, and international humanitarian law on this channel regarding things that Russia has done to break them. Horrifically. You've seen today where Russia has horrifically broken the Geneva Conventions. They wiped an entire city off the map. They burned Ukrainian POWs alive. They castrated a Ukrainian POW and summarily executed him. I mean, they shelled a hospital. They shelled a school. They shelled residential complexes. Like, and then just take a look at this. This is from the Russian. This is the official Russian Twitter for Russia at the United Nations. We circulated among United Nations Security Council members a letter regarding the use of the PFM-1 type of landmines, or Lepistov, by Ukrainian armed forces against civilians in Donbass. By doing so, they violated the basic rule of the international humanitarian law as enshrined in additional protocols to the 1949 Geneva Convention. The Ukrainian armed forces violate the very basic rule of international humanitarian law as enshrined in Article 48 of the protocol additional to the Geneva Conventions on the 12th of August 1949 relating to the protection of victims in international armed conflicts, Protocol 1 of 8th of June 1977. Parties to the conflict shall at all times distinguish between the civilian population combatants and between civilian objects and military objectives, and accordingly shall direct their operations only against military objectives. Paragraph 4 of the Article 51 as the protocol clearly prohibits indiscriminate attacks, defining them as those which are not directed at any specific military objective and those which employ a method or means of combat which cannot be directed at a specific military objective. I want you to pay attention to what I just said. This is what the Russians said. This is what they wrote to the United Nations Security Council. This is what they wrote. Article 51. Clear indiscriminate attacks defined as those which are not directed to any specific military objective and those which employ a method or means of combat which cannot be directed at a specific military objective. Okay. That means that this entire town was a military objective. This is the definition. This right here, this whole thing right here is the definition of an indiscriminate attack. This right here. Ukraine physically does not have the concentrations of artillery to do this. This is Ukraine didn't do this. Don't believe me? Okay, that's fine. Here. We'll go down here.
Done.
Once again, Mariupol. This is not this is the definition of an indiscriminate attack. Even in urban combat, even when you're conducting military operations in urbanized terrain or mount, there are still limitations. The entire city is destroyed. The entire city of Mariupol is bombed. Destroyed. It's gone. I could not, even mid-meeting, if I was in the middle of the live televised United States Security Council meeting, and I received this and read this, I would burst out laughing my ass off in the middle of the United Nations Security Council meeting. Because it is so unjustifiable by the Russians. They wrote this. They wrote this. You cannot. JL. This is even more enraging than if they would just say it in a straight face, because everybody knows that they did those things with a lot of evidence for that, yet they still they play the fool. Exactly. Like, that's the thing. Like, I would probably hate the Russian government less if they just admitted that they were doing terrible things. Rooster Cyborg, Russia must pay to rebuild. I think Russia should probably dissolve as a nation, but that's my... I don't think Russia as a nation should exist. I think they've lost the right as a nation to exist, personally. Not as, like, a people. The people are fine. Like, your average Russian is okay. But, like, as a government and as, like, a military, like, no. I think you've lost that right. I think you've lost it pretty bad. Russia should not exist, like, on an international platform. I don't think they should be in the United Nations. I don't think that they should be in the WHO. I don't think that they should participate in any kind of trade. Like, I don't think sanctions are enough. Like, I think that they just needed a complete embargo and to be cut off from the entirety of the civilized world. I think that power lines going into Russia should be severed. Like, I think you need to dig up all, like, I don't think Russia should, like, as an individual large country, should exist anymore. Like, this is unbelievable. You can't, there's no ground on this stream. I just showed you, on this stream alone, there's no ground there's no, like, high ground. There's no, like, moral high ground that Russia can sit on and say these things. Talk about indiscriminate attacks while leveling cities. That's so unbelievably, and you know, going back to the conversation earlier regarding, you know, propaganda. You know, maybe it was purposeful. This guy is literally a government delegation from the Russian Federation. Like, there were so many people, including Putin, that had to approve this. Like, there were so many things. Like, this is insane. This is insanity. How? How are more people not talking about this? I know, because it's so insane that I don't think it probably doesn't make a good news story to literally anyone else, but for me, like, it's you can't just do that. You just say you're the bad guy. I would hate you less. Eris Shang says, surprised they even have the face to even write this. I know. How did somebody not... There had to have been somebody. There had to have been somebody somewhere. Whether it was this guy's secretary, or if it was, you know, if it was Putin, or it was Lavrov, or anyone in between. Like, there wasn't somebody in the 50 hands that touched this thing in the email chain that read this thing and went, I don't know if we should say that. Like, there wasn't anybody with, like, a train of thought that was like, you know, maybe doing this is gonna make us look bad. Like, nobody in the know thought about that. Like, nobody? You're telling nobody thought about this? So many people had to read this. Like, so many people in the Russian government had to read this before they got the thumbs up to send this. And nobody thought, you know, maybe this is a bad idea. Like, maybe keep the concept, but maybe rewrite this part. Nobody thought about that? Jeez. I just... Oh, man. Yeah, Russia should just not exist as a country. Like, as a single unified government, I think it should just be broken up. It's lost the right. It's lost the right to exist as a single nation. Jeez. Anyway, moving on to a different point of news. You might notice this is a little bit of a different color than normal. I thought this should have its own color, just based off of what's going on. So we kind of went for a dark purple here. And that's because over the last few days, the tensions between Serbia and Kosovo, that relationship has heated up quite significantly. Tensions have risen between both Serbia and Kosovo. Borders are closed on both sides, and troops have been brought in. We can take a look at this here. And at this point, there's reports of gunfire and clashes between Serbian and Kosovo forces between the border of Serbia and Kosovo. The Kosovo Prime Minister, Albin Kurti, said armed groups controlled by the Serbian government opened fire in northern Kosovo today. The days ahead may be, quote, the days ahead may be difficult. We're facing a type of Serbian chauvinism that is very familiar to us.
Të dashur qytetarë të Republikës së Kosovës. Ende pa filluar lëshimi ynë I dokumentit.
So this is just his address regarding this. So why? Why is it familiar to us? Very familiar to us. Well, we actually have to go back in time a little bit. We got to go back in time between 20 and 30 years. And what we're going back in time to is the breakup of Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia used to be a big country that actually covered, you know, Slovenia, and, you know, Slovenia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Croatia, Serbia, Montenegro, Kosovo, North Macedonia, all of this. Like, that was all just Yugoslavia. And Yugoslavia broke up in 1991. That led to several different wars happening. Some of them were very short. Some of them not so much. And what ended up happening with that is that Yugoslavia, when it broke up, some of the wars did last a long time. The war between the Serbs and the Bosnians was horrific. I'm talking a ton of ethnic cleansing and genocide, and it's terrible. I've actually have on our website, I actually wrote about it. It's one of the NATO involvements. NATO became involved in Serbia, Kosovo, and Bosnia-Herzegovina in the 90s after the UN requested that NATO conduct airstrikes at the request of UN officials who were authorized under the UN Security Council to actually use force in order to protect safe areas to prevent ethnic cleansing and genocide when Serbian forces would attack them. And so the United States and NATO partners conducted a series of airstrikes against military targets as designated by the United Nations and areas outside of their safe zones. And they also shot down, of course, put a no-fly zone over Bosnia-Herzegovina and Serbia. The Bosnians committed some too, but the Serbs were the main perpetrators of ethnic cleansing and war crimes, according to the International Criminal Court, the ICC, the International Court of Justice. And it's terrible. If you ever heard the Trans-Siberian Orchestra's version of Carol of the Bells, which is a Christmas tune that's pretty widely played, it's very good. It's my favorite rendition of Carol of the Bells. But what that's also, its title is actually Christmas in Sarajevo, and it's about the siege of the city of Sarajevo back during the war in Bosnia-Herzegovina and Serbia. If you've ever seen the movie Behind Enemy Lines, that's also that has Owen Wilson starring in it. That's also based off of some events. It's a horrific portrayal of events. I mean, it's a cool like Hollywood movie, but it's about a downed pilot during the NATO intervention here, and where he was shot down. There was actually an event where a NATO pilot was shot down during a mission over this, but that's what this goes back to. Kosovo is under the protection of NATO. NATO forces are actually there. In fact, NATO forces have made their way. NATO and allied contingent have arrived at the border between Kosovo and Serbia. The K4, which is the NATO force for Kosovo, is closely monitoring the situation in the north of Kosovo with local and international security organizations. Under its UN mandate, K4 remains strongly committed to the security, ready to adopt necessary measures to keep Kosovo safe. And we actually have NATO K4 talking about this. So this is coming from Pristina. The overall security situation in the northern municipalities of Kosovo is tense. The NATO-led K4 mission is monitoring closely and is prepared to intervene if stability is jeopardized. In accordance with its mandate coming from United Nations Security Council Resolution 1244 in 1999, our NATO-led K4 mission is fully focused on the daily implementation of its UN mandate to ensure safe and secure environment and freedom of movement for all the people of Kosovo. K4 maintains a visible and agile posture on the ground, and K4 commander is in contact with all its main interlocutors, including the representatives of the Kosovo security organizations and the Serbian Chief of Defense. NATO also continues to fully support the normalization process between Pristina and Belgrade through the EU-facilitated dialogue and calls all partners to continue negotiations. It is important that this continues. This is critical for the regional peace and security, and there will be no real prospects for a better future in the Balkans without full respect for human rights and the democratic values, rule of law, domestic reforms, and a good neighborly relations. Constructive dialogue is key to regional stability. K4 will take whatever measures is necessary to keep safe and secure the environment of Kosovo at all times in line with its UN mandate. What does that mean? So once again, the K4 is closely monitoring the situation in northern Kosovo. What does this mean? Well, basically, if Serbia was to attack Kosovo, that would trigger NATO into a military response. And in a war between NATO and Serbia, Serbia doesn't probably last longer than, I'd say, 72 hours. Serbia their military forces there near Kosovo would be annihilated. Under a NATO air campaign, they would be annihilated pretty much instantly. Serbia would no longer have a military, and the NATO has already demonstrated that back in the 90s when they also bombed Serbian military forces into oblivion and shot down their entire air force. So Kaysen, who's one of our mods and researchers, says there's also a great but graphic documentary that shows the Kosovo conflict called War Photographer. Yeah. If you ever look at the conflict with Bosnia Herzegovina, Serbia, Kosovo, really the breakup of Yugoslavia, it's graphic. It's horrific. Yeah, I mean, ethnic cleansing and war crimes, mass graves, the whole. I mean, it's dirty. It's bad. When I was researching for that article, when I wrote about it, it's bad. It was, man. That's. There isn't really anything you could write about to do it justice, but Sarajevo alone was terrible, and everyone remembers Sarajevo. But there's so many things that happened. Srebrenica had, like there was a bombing in Srebrenica twice, where they just targeted the market just to kill as many Bosnian Muslims as they could. Like it that bad. They killed they rounded up 8,000 Bosnian men and boys and summarily executed them all in a single city. I mean, that is why I've talked about it a little bit before, but the peace here in this region is extremely fragile. I mean, extremely fragile. And that's why they do not like each other. They hate each other. They literally committed genocide against each other. Kosovo has to be protected by NATO to prevent Serbia from committing genocide against the people of Kosovo. It's that bad. And as we're seeing, it's not going very well right now. Now, I haven't heard that Serbian troops have actually crossed into Kosovo yet. It seems that there still seems to be hope. I think NATO is probably really keeping that hope there. I think if NATO troops weren't there, that local troops, there would already be a war going on. But if Serbia attacks Kosovo, the NATO response is going to be tenfold, and Serbia is not going to have a military to attack with anymore. They will be wiped off the face of the earth and annihilated, probably anywhere within 50 miles of Kosovo's border, I would say. Within 72 hours, Serbia would bend the knee. They would bend the knee very quickly. That brings us down here into Syria. Turkish UAV hit a Kurdish ammunition depot here in northern Syria. This is located here near Sarn, Syria. They hit the ammunition depot and the headquarters of a female PKK units in the city of Sarn near Kobani, the province of Aleppo. It's also reported that pro-Turkish militants again announced mobilization, waiting for orders from the Turkish government. Turkish government has once again been saber-rattling regarding, there's that strike, by the way, on the ammunition depot. They've been once again talking about invading and further expanding that exclusion zone inside of Syria from 30 kilometers to 60 kilometers. JL says it has changed throughout the years, though. Post-Yugoslavia countries live much better with each other. Yes, that's true. They do live better, but the peace is very fragile, and it's very... It's not like the fall of the USSR, where everyone just kind of claimed independence. Like Yugoslavia declared independence, and then shortly thereafter, everyone declared independence inside Yugoslavia, mostly along ethnic lines. And they don't like each other. They don't like each other at all. It's very bloody. All of them have similar military capabilities, and all of them, once again, have committed genocide and ethnic cleansing against each other. There has been a lot of work and a lot of constructive dialogue between a lot of them, like North Macedonia, Bosnia, Kosovo is trying to do their best, Bulgaria, Slovakia is doing fantastic as a country, Slovenia, the same thing. They're, the peace is there. It is there now. And they've worked very hard to maintain it for this long. I mean, the last time we're talking about really any violence was over 20 years ago, the very early 2000s. And there's some, and that was only ending after some minor insurgency movements. Like the main fighting was long over before that. It was just ending some minor insurgencies, which for the most part ended relatively peacefully. But that there's bad blood there, and it's really bad blood. It's kind of like the Polish with the Russians, or the Ukrainians. Once the war ends in Ukraine, I have a feeling that Ukrainians and Russians will never get along again on any meaningful level. And I think that's probably where they're all at, is they don't like each other, but they live with each other because they don't want to go back to ethnic cleansing and genocide against their people, because it's a very dark time. It's a very dark time in human history that is very commonly overlooked. We turn back down here into Baghdad as we once again continue in the Middle East. And there's violence once again in the Green Zone. The Sadrists, also known as the Sadr movement, and that's led by Muqtada al-Sadr, a fantastic individual who I'm really surprised that hasn't been killed in a drone strike. We've tried, but he just hasn't made it yet. He has taken over, anyway, his followers have taken over the Iraqi parliament building, and they're currently calling for the execution of the former Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki. Attempts to break into the Green Zone of Baghdad are also ongoing to further expand this movement. Muqtada al-Sadr himself called on the UN to support him in overthrowing a number of political parties and figures within the country of Iraq. You can take a look here. So you got some photos here. They're just chilling in the Iraqi parliament building. This guy that they're holding up, that's Muqtada al-Sadr. And to say the least, he's not a good guy. He is Iranian-backed. He is very good friends with a lot of terrorist organizations, is what we would call them. He led insurgency movements against the United States, once again backed by Iran. He is in control of what's called the Mahdi Army. Now it's called the Peace Brigades. As you can tell, they're probably not very peaceful. He's also very well connected with Kataib Hezbollah, who constantly is trying to kill Americans. He had a huge poster. I'll have to find that at some point for you guys. But he had a huge poster that I actually have a picture of from being at the Baghdad embassy during the protests back in 2020 there. I mean, this thing's huge. I mean, it took up like 4 floors of an apartment complex across from the embassy. I mean, it's a huge poster of this guy's face. Unknown people in masks fired at the Sadrists. 2 people have been killed and about 65 wounded. Protesters in Baghdad are storming the building of the Ministry of Defense right now. Among them are more and more speeches about a revolution. So far, 125 protesters and 25 security officials have been reportedly injured in clashes. Military says that they are not attacking the Sadrists at this point. We can see here. Appears to be one of the masked gunmen up there. Yeah, to say, so he's very popular in Iraq. He's a religiously extremist cleric who's very popular amongst poorer Shia ethnic groups. That's really what he targets politically. He's very much an extremist. He's about anything. He's very anti-American coalition. He's very anti-foreign intervention. He's very anti establishment. Basically, he basically he killed off about 3 or 4 back in the early 2000s, like 2003, 2004. He's the reason why the fighting in Baghdad resumed. Actually, the fighting in Baghdad resumed because of him, and he actually encouraged his followers to loot and pillage, just because of the United States trying to cut down on the looting and pillaging that was happening after the fall of Saddam Hussein. When the U.S. was trying to keep order, this guy had his followers, who were followers of his father, actually. But he had his followers and his paramilitary group, the Mahdi Army, actually go out and loot and pillage, saying that they would pay, quote unquote, the local clergy that was under him for the goods that were stolen, promises of payment. And then he also, once again, had a paramilitary group called the Mahdi Army. If you need a paramilitary group, you're probably not doing so hot. You're just a terrorist. But yeah, he had he killed 3 or 4 of the supreme ayatollahs within Baghdad in 2003 and 2004. And then the Mahdi Army was one of the big they were I think the biggest contribution to the insurgency movement in Baghdad, specifically against coalition forces there. And I'm talking, they killed dozens of coalition troops, dozens of them. So yeah, he's not a very good guy. He's a very bad guy, very bad guy. He basically, being friends with Iran, he basically wants to be kind of like the Ayatollah in Tehran. He was the supreme leader of Iran. Like you have the prime minister of Iran, you have the president of Iran, and then you have the Ayatollah, because Iran is actually they're actually a theocracy. They're not a democracy. They're not even an autocratic state. They are a theocracy, which I technically guess is an autocratic state, but Iran's not exactly the most ethical people in the world. Ethical government in the world, I should say. Over here in Kabul, we have explosions that rock Kabul. So this is coming from Mutala Nabil, the former head of the National Security in Afghanistan, said early this morning that American drones appeared in the airspace above Kabul, which attacked various parts of the city. According to Nabil, on the basis of the Doha Agreement, Americans are helping the Taliban in suppressing the Islamic State. Taliban audio messages appeared on the network, which confirmed the information about UAV strikes on Kabul, and a photo of the drone was also published. According to available information, there are no casualties. Apparently, the Islamic State militants left the strike in advance, which we do know now is not true. Because the U.S. did confirm the airstrike in Kabul, knowing that the target was a senior al-Qaeda official. According to the media reports, they are saying that they kill, or the president has announced that we have killed Ayman Zawahiri. Ayman Zawahiri is when I say a senior al-Qaeda official, he's the leader of al-Qaeda. He helped plan the 9/11 attacks. He was the number 2 in al-Qaeda, with number 1 being Osama bin Laden. And he assumed control of al-Qaeda following Osama bin Laden's death. So he is very much the number 1 guy. After Osama bin Laden, this guy was the one to get. He and Osama bin Laden planned out the 9/11 attacks together. He assisted very much heavily into orchestrating them, and also made sure that the insurgency carried on following the invasion. I mean, he's the guy. If you're going to kill anyone after Osama bin Laden, that's him. Taliban also has confirmed the fact that the U.S. airstrike, condemning and stating that it violates the Doha agreements, and that the repetition of such attacks could negatively affect the existing capabilities of the two sides. So we do have this. So you can see the fire there. It looks really big, but that's it. When I say that we literally have the ability to put a missile into someone's bedroom and not even affect the kitchen, I quite mean it. That guy's apartment's fine. That guy's pigeon coop on the roof is fine. And trust me, there's a pigeon coop up there. That guy's pigeon coop is fine. That bedroom, the guy's dead. Okay? That drone strike went splatter painting, is what happened right there. But that guy's dead as hell. But everyone else, fine. His neighbors, pissed, but they're fine. They're totally okay. It looks crazy. There's actually the drone strike. It's an MQ-9 Reaper drone that reportedly conducted the strike. And it's precise. And what they use is called the R9X. It's a type of Hellfire missile. It's pretty cool. The Hellfire missile is kind of like a tow missile that you can fire from an aircraft. And that's a very big understatement, but that's essentially what it is. It's a guided missile that you can fire from an aircraft. And this one specifically, it has, it's capable. This one has been modified to be a very precise weapon system. This is literally the weapon system I'm talking about when I say it can literally hit a target and just go through somebody's window and kill just that room full of people, like just that room, that specific bedroom. This is it. As long as you can get outside entry, or you want to make yourself a hole, this thing will penetrate, and it will just, yeah, it's very, very precise, very well done when it comes to the strike.
My fellow Americans, on Saturday, at my direction, the United States successfully concluded an airstrike in Kabul, Afghanistan that killed the emir of Al-Qaeda, Ayman al-Zawahiri. You know, Zawahiri was bin Laden's leader. He was with him the whole time. He was his number 2 man, his deputy at the time.
So there you go. That's the President of the United States confirming that we did kill the number 2 guy in in Al-Qaeda. So we're actually going to skip over China real quick. And that's because Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House of the United States, has landed in Taipei. So the long-awaited visit that has been just making the Chinese fume, and giving Xi Jinping a slow but sure aneurysm, has finally occurred. She did land. She reportedly landed after being escorted in by Taiwanese Air Force jets, jet fighters. So the Chinese Foreign Ministry issued a final warning to the United States less than 20 minutes before her landing. Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, quote, Pelosi's visit to Taiwan will be a gross interference in China's internal affairs and will lead to very serious events and dire consequences. The American special aircraft carrying U.S. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi landed in Taipei, and the aircraft was escorted by the Taiwan Air Force fighter aircraft. The visit, quote, the visit of the U.S. congressional delegation to Taiwan is a sign of the U.S.'s unwavering support for a democratic Taiwan. And that's what Nancy Pelosi said after she got off the aircraft. So there she is, landing right there in Taipei. Once again from Nancy Pelosi. Our discussions with Taiwan's leadership reaffirms our support for our partner and promote of shared interests, including advancing a free and open Indo-Pacific region. Yeah, not what China wants to hear. China should give up on Taiwan. That's coming from Rooster Sideburns. Yeah, well, try telling China that. China has no interest in giving up Taiwan. China is pissed. Unbelievably pissed off. Basically, there's something called the One China policy. And the U.S. maintains this, and Russia really maintains this now that they're trying to be all buddy-buddy with China. And that is that there is only one China. Taiwan doesn't exist as a country. Taiwan is a sovereign nation, or Taiwan is an independent country that's not considered a sovereign nation, even under the United Nations. They are not part of the United Nations because of China. That's because Taiwan, historically speaking, is Chinese. Taiwan was the federalist parties of that controlled China until the communist takeover immediately following World War II. They retreated to the island of Formosa, which is Taiwan, and that is now where they reside. And was only relatively recently in history, actually, that they became a democracy. Just because they were federalists does not mean that they were democratic at all. And actually, pretty bad authoritarian regime until the improvements with democracy and everything else for Taiwan. But the United States does have security agreements with Taiwan. If China ever attempted to attack Taiwan, the United States would actually go to war with China. That's why we would go to war with China, is Taiwan. And visiting Taiwan has essentially been off limits. And the United States has essentially said, yeah, we're really getting tired of this now. And so now Nancy Pelosi is currently in Taipei, which is awesome. So I think it's awesome. Yeah, screw the Chinese. I don't. Here's the thing: you're the last bastion of communism. But if China was to go to war with the United States, what would happen? Realistically, economies make everything. Economies win wars. The United States has proven that they can go from the worst depression in human history economically to producing everything themselves and outproducing the entirety of the world. We've proven it. 1943 was the peak production capability of the United States. 95% of everything produced in the United States went to a war effort. And we were still able to provide for every American. And then we had a huge economic boom immediately following that. That lasted for decades, up until the 70s. So we know that the United States can do that. And if China was to stop, or it was to go to war with the United States, China's probably biggest importer of goods is the United States. Who is giving China money? The United States is giving China money. And going to war automatically means China has an embargo by the United States. Because Walmart ain't buying cheap, $3 shirts. So yeah. The Chinese government, they're literally putting the Uyghurs into concentration camps. So if they're gonna piss China off, then let's just get it over with, I guess. I don't know. And China obviously hasn't responded very well, but they have responded less than what we thought they were going to. China gave all these military threats. JL says Taiwan is a grain of sand in the eye for China. They really want it so badly. It really is. I mean, Taiwan isn't a major thing when it comes to like China has a huge amount of land. They have a huge amount of people. They have a huge amount of resources. They're a huge exporter of a lot of things. They have the largest military in the world. Like they are a huge country. They're a very powerful country. But it's not that Taiwan is important on a lot of scales. The biggest thing Taiwan would be importance-wise is the fact that is their microchip production. They have the ability to produce amazingly highly needed microchips, very small microchips, very important ones that are used for very advanced components, electrical components. Taiwan produces that. They produce other goods too. There's a couple of things that economically it would make sense to take Taiwan for, but it's not really about what makes sense economically or geographically. Taiwan is nothing more than China wants to be unified again. It's like North and South Korea. North and South Korea, they don't like each other. One's democratic, one's communist. They don't like each other because of that, and they want a one. Yeah, Max says Taiwan is the 21 economy in the world. But it's like only one person rules China. And Taiwan existing as a separate democratic nation, as the Federalists, is saying that there is mainland China and Taiwan China. Both lay claim to being the actual Chinese government. Much like South Korea says that they're the actual Korean government, they're the Democratic Korea, and Pyongyang says that they are the Communist Korea. All of it is Korea. All of Korea belongs to North Korea. All of Korea belongs to South Korea. Both of them have that rhetoric. Vietnam, same rhetoric, clear up until the communist takeover of South Vietnam in the 70s, immediately following the U.S. withdrawal in the Vietnam War. Exact same situation, except with China. It's not about the resources. It's not about the economy. It's about what it stands for. Taking over Taiwan means that the Chinese Communist Party has consolidated their holdings completely over all of China. And as long as Taiwan exists as a nation, and as long as is recognized as an independent nation, China will never truly be whole under the communist regime. It's about communist expansionism. And the Chinese take it very seriously as a government because they're the last bastion of communism. Because guess what? The original bastion of communism killed itself. JL says 3 main reasons. Taiwan economy, uniting China, and not wanting to have a U.S. supporting country just next to them. Yeah, essentially. But they'd still have to contend with Japan, South Korea, I guess the Philippines are kind of but also Australia and New Guinea and New Zealand. Yeah, it's not great. I mean, yeah, sure, these guys are a little bit further away, but, I mean, the Yellow Sea is not very far. Japan's not very far. And the U.S. also has the capability of literally putting troops anywhere in the world within, 8 hours. So, no problem. It's not like our carriers run out of fuel. They need refueled every, 20 years because they run on nuclear reactors. I mean, they could just sail nonstop. If it wasn't for the fact people have to eat, a carrier could circumnavigate the world essentially infinite times. They would never really have to refuel the reactor. It just could for 20 years straight, you could just circumnavigate the world. It would be fine. But the Chinese are not taking to this, but they haven't responded. They haven't responded with actions against Taiwan specifically. I think that China understands that going to war with the United States over this visit would tank their economy, and therefore they would lose a war pretty disastrously. It would be very bloody, but they would not outlast the U.S. economy. That's just not going to happen. The Chinese military exercises are now taking place. This is off of the coastal regions of the Fujian province, which is right next to Taiwan. And at least 3 of them, the artillery landing zones, where they are shelling, is actually within Taiwan's territorial waters, which is designated by the United Nations. This was announced on the eve of the arrival of the Taiwan speaker in Taiwan, of the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. They perceive it as an invasion of their own territory. That's what they're calling this, is an invasion of their own territory. Nancy Pelosi is invading China. Single-handedly invading China. At the same time, an American aircraft carrier group is now currently headed to the area. Taiwan has raised its fighters into the sky and is expecting an attack from China at this point. To be honest, I have no idea what MRS system that's called, but I bet you can guess what it's a knockoff of. China's military is nothing but a knockoff of something else. It's like every off-brand Lego that they have ever made. China is going to be invading, or they're saying that they could invade Taiwan. Probably not going to happen. Probably not going to happen. China's been saying they're going to invade Taiwan for decades. Literally since China took over mainland China, they've said that they were going to invade Taiwan. They've never invaded Taiwan. That was at the end of World War II. But now, as you can tell, this is the knockoff of the Grad system, the BM-121 Grad system. Which fires 40, 120 millimeter Katyusha rockets. Everything of the Chinese military is a knockoff of something. Their 5th generation fighters are a knockoff F-35. That's what's in development. It's a knockoff F-35. Their tanks are knockoff T-90s and T-14s. Specifically, the Type 85 TAC-3 is essentially a knockoff of a T-90 main battle tank from the Russian Federation. Their most commonly used small arms weapon is the Chinese-produced AK-47 and AK-74. Their artillery systems are knockoff Grad systems, knockoff 2S7s, or 2S3s, 2S1s, 2S7s. It's like if you were to make, like I said, it's like every knockoff Lego toy or knockoff toy or game or anything else that China has ever produced for Wish. JL says China is pretty much self-sufficient country, and they're the one having factories. Sad to say, but we shouldn't underestimate China. I don't underestimate China. I don't underestimate the nation that went from having one of the smallest navies in the world to the largest navy in the world in less than a decade. I don't underestimate that whatsoever. I also don't underestimate a billion-man army, because that's very difficult to logistically maintain, even in domestic capabilities. That's a very hard military to maintain. It's a million-man army, but I think I said a billion, but it's a large military. The PLA is huge. Rooster Cyber, did you see China's new bomber that looks like the B-1? No, but I'm not surprised. Like I said, everything's a knockoff. They don't know how to build things themselves. They wait for another country to produce something really cool, like the Javelin, and then they take it and they're like, it kind of works like this, and then they build their own. And it's like when you're doing the test and you let your friend cheat off of you and you say, here's the answers, just change them a little bit so it doesn't look like you cheated off of me. That's pretty much what China does with everything that they do. Their economy is that, like, their everything on Wish is probably from China. Like, it's terrible. It's all Chinese knockoff stuff. Even their body armor and everything else. Like, it's just cheap knockoff stuff. Their military is just cheap knockoff stuff. Their active personnel in the PLA is 2,035,000 active duty personnel, with 510,000 estimated reserve personnel as of 2022. So they have a huge army, and that's logistically hard to maintain. Like, that's very hard to maintain. But China, just like with the biggest buyer of goods for China is the United States. Like, we are the biggest single buyer of Chinese goods. Everything you buy at Walmart, look at the tag on your shirt. Look at the tag on your Tupperware or your plates or your anything. If you buy from a large supermarket somewhere in the United States, you are buying probably something from China. There's stuff that says made in China everywhere, synonymous with being made in China. So it's ridiculous. But being that large of a buyer, cutting that off when economies win wars, you automatically tank your economy. And there's nobody really to make up for it. You're going to go to the Russian market. The ruble's worthless. If you were hoping for, and also, if the U.S. cuts you off in Taiwan, Europe's not far behind. Europe is also very interested in seeing Taiwan stay as a democratic nation and taking. And if anyone should have learned anything, China probably should have watched what happened to Russia invading Ukraine. And that's what we thought was happening, and apparently they didn't. Sikpinka says the aircraft on the carrier kind of need fuel too. Nuke subs really only need food and minor stuff. I was just talking about the ship itself. I'm tracking that the aircraft still need aviation fuel. But they also have huge tanks of it. You know, it's not like World War II where the aircraft carrier and the aircraft are running essentially on the same fuel type. They're both running on some kind of a high-octane diesel. China's mortgage crisis, banks are failing, protests everywhere. You could cover this soon. Yeah, I actually saw that article. Yeah, it's pretty bad. China's having a lot of issues already economically, but they're a communist government, so I don't think they necessarily care. The Soviet Union didn't care. North Korea certainly doesn't care. What they care about is control and power. And as long as they have control and power and a military that has over 2 million people in it, closer to 3, then you can kind of maintain that power as long as you keep the military happy. You can see here. Once again, like I said, the Chinese... What is this? That's a 2S3. Like, cleared out of the stamped road wheels. That's a 2S3. But it's not. It's a Chinese version of the 2S3. Once again, just change my answers. Or in this case, a paint scheme. Those, then you can knock off MI8s. The Chinese military is transferring the PHL-16 MLRS to the Fujian province, which is located 180 kilometers from Taiwan. It's specified that this MLRS can fire various calibers, 300mm, 370mm, 380mm, and 750mm. They're also transferring intercontinental ballistic missiles, the DF-5B, which flies a distance of 12,000 to 15,000 kilometers. You can see some of these transfers here. Once again, what does this look like? See, if I didn't know better, I could possibly say this is like Eastern Russia. Or what? Yeah, Eastern Russia. And this is stuff headed to Ukraine. Like, if I didn't know better. Same thing with this. So this is the landing areas. So this is where they're going to be shelling. And these zones are being marked as danger zones for where artillery will be landing. So yeah, this is Chinese. This is the Chinese response. Once again, they've already begun their military exercises. You can see here. It's like that Monty Python skit, I fart in your general direction. Erva Shang says, of what use could these cross the strait? If not, why carrying them? It's a show of force. That's really what the Chinese are doing. It's a show of force right now. They're saying, basically what they're saying is you've now landed in China, when China policy, remember. You've landed in China. You're invading China with Nancy Pelosi. I wouldn't send a diplomat if I was invading China. I would send probably the one of, if not the most powerful military force in the world to invade China. And secondly, it's a show of force. They're doing this to show the world we have these things. Like, if we wanted to, we have the ordnance and the artillery capability to wipe China to wipe Taiwan, off the face of the earth. And they have a lot of artillery. They have a lot of equipment. Once again, they're logistically very capable as a military. Well, they're very logistically capable on land. What they do lack is amphibious ships, which they're building. They are building. Their dry dock capability of actually building ships, their shipyards, is impressive. It's insane how fast they can produce a ship. But they have the resources, and they can dedicate those resources because they have control over it. So, but it's impressive. They have impressive military capability on land. Amphibious wise, no, but what they're doing is they're showing we have this equipment and we can put it to use. We have a lot of it to put to use. And it's just to show the world, and it's to specifically show the United States and Taiwan that they're very capable. If they're going to go to war with somebody, they're very capable of doing so. So that is why they're moving this stuff. It's probably not intended for actual use, because if it does, the response is going to be immense. Absolutely immense. Let's just not talk about it unless there is response. Immense. As we jump down here into Africa, Al-Shabaab militants attacked a Somali military unit, killing well over 100 security officials. And more militants, of course, were also killed. This Al-Shabaab is an Al-Qaeda-linked militant organization. They're a terrorist organization, and they attacked here in the Bakul region bordering along Ethiopia. So they reportedly seized a military unit that was housed the anti-terrorist police unit, according to the ITO statement. We can see some of that here. We got some stuff burning. Once again, in areas like this, in regions like this, terrorist organizations, especially in Africa, get a lot of backing. They also have a lot of power. They're basically on equal footing with the militaries that are trying to root them out. They've had a lot of time to grow. They have a lot of military capability within this region, and that's why Africa is the forefront against counterinsurgency, especially against the Islamic State and affiliated groups with other known terrorist organizations such as Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, like Boko Haram and JNIM. JLS, is there anything similar like in Ukraine happening, like grouping up of military equipment and troops in numbers that could suggest anything? That's in regards to China. Well, yes, they've brought a lot of troops into. They brought a lot of troops and equipment into the Fujian province, which if they were going to invade Taiwan, it would be out of the Fujian province. They have brought in a very significant number of troops and equipment, and they're still bringing more in. But I think it's too early. That amount of troops and equipment, and the troops and equipment needed to invade Taiwan, the whole island of Taiwan is basically a giant. Taking Taiwan would be like taking Iwo Jima times 1,000. The whole country, the mountains are hollowed out with bunkers systems. There's entire hangar bays where they can hide most of their air force inside of Taiwan's mountains. There are bunkers built into the beaches, in strategic locations at any landing points. It's probably Taiwan is probably one of the best pinnacle examples statistically, like on paper, because obviously, like we said, that a lot of people, including Westerners, thought that Ukraine wouldn't last very long against a war against Russia, and look at what happened. But on paper, at least, Taiwan is the perfect example of a defense in depth. And some of that playbook is taken out of the Japanese Empire on Iwo Jima, where they inflicted a massive amount of casualties, over 24,000 casualties against American forces, to be exact, which is actually one of the few times, I believe it's the only time, Iwo Jima is actually the only example in which the Japanese actually took less losses than the Americans did during the island hopping campaign of World War II. The Japanese lost 21,000 troops on the island of Iwo Jima, with essentially, there was only a couple hundred of survivors of the battle that actually surrendered. So they essentially took complete losses, and the Americans took 24,000 casualties in the battle. So Taiwan is essentially that, except it's the entire island, and it's a much bigger island. And so to take Taiwan would take 2 million men. It would have to be an impressive feat. We're not seeing that amount of mobilization, but we are seeing an impressive amount of mobilization. I think it's just too early to tell at this point. I think it really, I don't think China or the U.S. is interested in going to war against each other, which is what would realistically happen. I think it's just probably going to stick at saber rattling, because I think China understands this. I think China understands that, yes, do you want Taiwan? Yeah, but is it worth it truly? The rhetoric is yes. I don't think anyone is prepared for a war over Taiwan. I don't think anyone really wants a war over Taiwan as badly as they want to fulfill that in China. I don't think they want to go to war with the United States over it. I think everyone realizes that no one truly wins in that fight, and I think that's kind of the situation with this whole ordeal. I think they're gonna bring a bunch of artillery here. They're gonna conduct some scary exercises until Nancy Pelosi leaves. Probably some more after that. They're probably gonna have some more flight incursions. Then they're gonna get intercepted and then probably move on. I think it will just be a low point in relations, and then life goes on. We go down here into South Africa, where 2 protesters have been killed in riots. Protesters are currently rioting here in South Africa over rising energy costs and living costs. A lot of this is associated with the rising costs for standard of living happening globally as a result of a twofold factor. Some of that is because of the ongoing war in Ukraine and the international conflicts currently ongoing throughout the world. And some of that is also because of the coronavirus, which screwed up logistical capabilities for the last couple of years and really slowed logistics for a while and really screwed everything up there. Luckily, that's starting to come back now, but the new ongoing conflicts throughout the world and geopolitical situations have compounded that situation, and we've been seeing that pretty much globally, especially in other countries such as Peru, here in South Africa, Argentina, and the like. So we're going to go ahead and stop it there. As we jump over here into the United States, we have a couple of different updates. First of all, the non-binding resolution has been unanimously passed by the Senate here in the United States, which approved for Antony Blinken to designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. If you want to read more, you can go ahead and check out the New York Times, but they unanimously pass a non-binding resolution, meaning they're not forcing him to do this, but it's highly encouraged. if you can understand that. And of course, my meme here is "Do it, do it." And we get another meme here. I've been trying to do this. It makes it a little bit more fun. But few of life's problems can't be solved with a properly placed charge of high explosive. That's correct. I have a hard time thinking of one that wouldn't be solved. Bank vaults, marital issues. Yeah, some well-placed high explosives will definitely do some wonders on a lot of different issues. Anyway, political opponents. $550 million new aid package. It includes, according to the Department of Defense, 75,000 rounds of 155 millimeter ammunition and an unspecified amount of more HIMARS munitions, including unspecified variants of HIMARS munitions. Once again, this comes from the Ukrainian Minister of Defense, who retweeted the immediate press release from the Department of Defense on August the 1st, outlining this. So they are going to continue to provide these capabilities. Ammunition is obviously, the guns don't do you any good if you can't shoot them. So very good to see that here in the United States. And now we get to move on to some fun stuff, some interesting and cool stuff that's happening throughout the world. Rooster Sideburns, well-placed memes. I always try to get well-placed memes. You gotta lighten this thing up. We're talking about really dark and depressing stuff all day. You gotta lighten it up somehow. You gotta. I mean, come on. No one wants to come here and cry every night. Let's try and laugh too. We'll try to laugh through the pain and cope with it. So here we are. The fourth person in history has been cured of HIV. 8 scientists on Wednesday declared that a patient appears to have been cured of HIV infection. This would make him only the fourth person in history to have been cured of HIV. The 66-year-old man has had HIV since the 1980s. He's being referred to as the City of Hope patient, after the City of Hope National Medical Center in California here, just outside of LA, where he was treated as he has opted to be anonymous. Like the 3 previous patients who were declared cured from HIV, the City of Hope patient was also suffering from cancer and received a bone marrow transplant, which is how he got treatment. So if you want more info, you can look at Outlook Kindia, which is here, linked in this point on the map. And so, pretty cool. Unfortunately, bone marrow transplants are extremely expensive, and they're also extremely difficult, which is why there has been more treatment of it. But hopefully, as medical practices continue to develop throughout the world, hopefully we'll see more of this kind of stuff. I would like to see a lot more people finally get treatments for things like HIV and AIDS. So pretty cool to see, and hopefully we see more of it. And as we move back over here, just outside of DC, this is the NASA Goddard Flight Center, and they have released a new picture from the James Webb Telescope. This is of the Cartwheel Galaxy. Oh no, I got a 404 error. Image galleries. There we go. We got it, everyone. So this is the Cartwheel Galaxy taken from the James Webb Telescope. James Webb Telescope was slightly damaged due to a micrometeorite, but it seems to have not impacted the mission whatsoever, which is fantastic to see. But I'm happy to see that they have released a new photograph. This is so beautiful. This is awesome to see. I mean, there's never been a better camera put in space up until this very point. So it's awesome to be able to see this kinds of stuff, and you can see it's not just this galaxy, which is, while it is the focus, but we have so many others that are located. We got these all over here in the background. You can see all the galaxies lighting up in the background too. I mean, this is awesome. This is awesome. Space is cool. Space is very, very cool. I would love to go into space. However, I have an immense feeling that it's probably not for me. First of all, I would not consider myself, after now being out of the Marine Corps, I didn't consider myself the most physically fit person in the Marine Corps to begin with. I definitely am not now. So I don't know if I'd withstand the 20 plus G's that you take going into outer space. But if they ever come up with a better way of doing it, and I can get over my fear of possibly going into space, because I find shipwrecks really cool too. I would love the idea of diving down to the Titanic though, and actually seeing that Titanic in person. Terrifying. I don't know if I'd be able to do that. Like actually go down to a shipwreck. That eeriness to it is kind of terrifying to me. I love looking at them. I find them fascinating. Space is the same way. You know, being up in space, going to the International Space Station, you know, going on a space shuttle, you know, maybe going to a moon base when they finally build it here with the Artemis missions. Like that would be cool. Like that would be absolutely awesome. I don't know how well I would actually do in space. You know, knowing that just outside this window is a vacuum, and if something goes wrong, I am screwed. And it's also very eerie, I'm sure. But yeah, really cool. I mean, it's fascinating. But space is cool in general. Astrophysics is cool. You know, astronomy is cool. Astrology is cool. So very fascinating indeed. But that actually wraps up all of the news of the night. I know it's been a little bit of a long one tonight, and so I hope that you guys have enjoyed. I hope that you guys have found any of this kind of knowledgeable, or any of my comments at least interesting or knowledgeable. I'm sure I've said some pretty controversial stuff tonight. Well, sometimes controversy comes with the topics that we talk about. We have a very clear bias for Ukraine for obvious reasons, and I did 2 tours in Syria and Iraq. I saw some things that aren't super kind, and nor do I really wish to talk about when I was there. And when I see the stuff that's happening in places like Ukraine and throughout the world, it gets very frustrating to me, because I feel like it's a low point in humanity. And when it comes to some of these topics, I see some of the rhetoric that's being tossed around, and I understand the historical precedents behind a lot of this stuff, or at least I attempt to, and I just don't understand it. How, as humanity, we can come to some of these points. China, with China and with things like Ukraine, there's always a better option, and I just don't think that the better option has been taken at any of these points. So, other than that, I'm also sorry. Apparently, there's been a lot of spam bots in the chat tonight. Sorry to hear about that. Well, sometimes it comes with the topics, especially when we're talking about this kind of stuff. And as we get bigger in popularity, they only come out more and more for us. You know what? I say let them come. I'm sure the mods are doing a fantastic job. By the way, please thank the staff on this. Like, I know that I'm out here and I'm the one speaking, but the staff are really the ones that do this. They make sure the chat's good. They get your questions to me. They do the research on this stuff. They're monitoring the Discord. They're doing an immense amount of stuff, and it's really them. You know, Riley, Kaysen, the whole staff team behind this is really the ones that are making this work. I couldn't do it without them. They are amazing. They're very intellectual. They're very smart. They give us the ability to have a lot of, to be able to do a lot of what we do here. So fantastic on them. Give them a prop, guys, or give them a round of applause there. But I hope that you guys have enjoyed. Thank you for joining us once again tonight. Thank you for your support over the last few days. I know that we haven't been streaming, but thank you for supporting us through that. And hopefully we'll try and hopefully nothing else comes up, but we'll hopefully be back on our regular scheduled program. We'll see you once again tomorrow night at 10 p.m. and 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central. I hope that you found this knowledgeable. I hope that you enjoyed. And please be sure to check out the video description below. We're never doing super chats. We're never pushing merchandising on this channel. And the whole point of all of this, why we're doing this, is because we want you to be informed. We want you to let you know what's going on throughout the world. And the reason being is because we can help as a community. You guys allow us to be able to help people throughout the world with all of the different donation links we have in the description. Hopefully we get large enough that we can actually put things onto the stream, actual fundraisers onto the stream, and help people that way as well. But check out the video description below. You're going to see a ton of different links. Please jump onto our Discord. Let a staff member know. Our Discord is in the description as well. And let a staff member know if you have another organization we don't have listed. But we're always looking for more. If you can't give lots of these organizations, give a little. And if you can't give anything at all, that's fine. Let your friends know about us. Give us a like. Give us a subscribe. It helps us reach out to more people. And the more people that come here, overall, the more of an impact we as a community will have on people's lives throughout the world. And I can't think of a better thing to do, especially with all the bad things that is going on throughout the world right now that's impacting millions of people. And not just in Ukraine, but in other places too. Ethiopia, Somalia, Southeast Asia, South Africa, in the Middle East, in South America, all over the world, there are people suffering that we can help with, and we want to help them all. So thank you for helping us on that endeavor. Thank you for supporting those organizations we have listed. That's really what this is all about. But hopefully we'll see you once again tomorrow. In the meantime, please remain safe. And by the way, congratulations, you made it to Wednesday. So I hope that you guys have a wonderful Wednesday, wonderful midpoint in the week. But I hope that you, your family, and your friends remain safe. If not, I hope that you do find that safety and security in the very near future. Hopefully, we'll see you once again tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time and 9 p.m. Central. My name is Paul from the New News, and have a fantastic night, guys.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас звать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше швехуйло. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям с кирпичом, даже танки и бачок. Вам не взять нас и за 100 тысяч лет. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО.
Mr. Putin, on behalf of all our guys, no one's scared of your nuclear device. You can take your top 11, shove it up your wrinkle bomb. Oh, we'll come and help you fit it in your skull.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе, діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Ідіть нахуй.